Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. It is Monday, November 24th, 2015. Just so you know, and to be clear, we had this webinar scheduled for last week, but there was a mix-up in the dates and the invitation, so we're happy to be doing it the week of Thanksgiving and think it's, of course, very appropriate for this week. Hope you all have a wonderful holiday this week with your family, and we'll talk a little bit about families at some point this evening. But with this theme, I wanted to get into the topic of gratitude and to talk about where it comes from, how we can develop it, how we can practice it. The first thing I know about encouraging gratitude in others is don't tell them to feel grateful. Teach them to feel everything. Gratitude, for it to be deep and consistent in our lives, comes from a sense of wholeness. We can learn to feel everything. When we learn to feel everything, we are more likely to recognize the feelings of gratitude. As we more fully hold our pain, sadness, and hurt, we will also come to see their connection to love and joy. And for me, this really mirrors or goes hand in hand with a lot of the principles that we talk about in therapy and in wilderness therapy, is we're teaching children how to feel. And as I'll say later in this webinar, probably more than one time, I've never seen teenagers and young adults so grateful as the ones that I see in wilderness therapy. Not always in the beginning, and not every one of them all the way through, but as a group, they develop a sense of gratitude. And part of that comes from this sense of wholeness, this feeling of everything. And when we try to shave off the lows of our feelings, we're going to also shave off the related highs of our feelings. And so learning to feel, learning to have a deep sense of all of our emotions is the best way that I know to develop it. And this really goes along with mindfulness. Mindfulness is the opposite practice of self-medicating and escapism. Mindfulness is a practice or effort to focus on what is. Mindfulness can increase our sense of gratitude. Thich Nhat Hanh teaches that the first thing we notice when we wake up with a toothache is the previous non-toothache we have been taking for granted. Mindfulness means that we will recognize our non-toothache before it is gone. This will engender gratitude for our non-toothache. So if you ever hear me refer to the non-toothache, it's this idea that it's easy to take things for granted that we don't notice. And so mindfulness, or therapy, and I think of therapy as a kind of a mindfulness, it is to turn our attention or concentration to the positive feelings that we have, to the feelings that we take for granted, like being alive, like breathing. Even learning to appreciate the pain that we experience is because we recognize that pain is connected to our joy. Here's another principle that feeds into this idea of gratitude. It's this idea of a negativity bias that human beings have, and it's a evolutionary principle. There may be a biological barrier to gratitude. It is our negativity bias. Negativity bias served us in survival because our brains were wired to recognize threats more than non-threats. This emphasis of the brain to focus on the negative ensured we survived to pass on our genes. In other words, if there were two things in your field of attention, one of them was, say, a nice meal, a tasty piece of fruit. The other one was a tiger that could kill you. The consequence for not seeing the tiger is death, whereas the consequence of not seeing the fruit is that you miss one tasty meal. So our brains would then, through evolution, be wired to pay more attention to the negative. And I think almost everybody can relate to that strange phenomenon that most human beings experience, that I can hear 10 positive things, but if I hear one negative thing, I'm going to focus on that. And negativity bias can explain that. It can also explain why we oftentimes don't feel grateful for the things that we have. Cultivating an attitude of gratitude has been linked to better health, sounder sleep, less anxiety and depression, higher long-term satisfaction with life, and kinder behavior towards others, including romantic partners. So gratitude can actually change the way that we behave, can change the way that we feel, can add to our life satisfaction. And I think most importantly, and I'll talk about this as I go along, it often is evidence of good mental health. And I think a lot of us, or I hear a lot of people talking about starting off with gratitude, trying to be grateful, trying to encourage people to be grateful. But in the spirit of that, I'm going to talk about some ways that we can develop gratitude, that we can learn to practice gratitude. From an article that I read a few years ago, I borrowed this idea of practicing gratitude, like starting off slowly. They found in studies that keeping a journal listing 5 things that you're grateful for, and to keep it very brief and simple, and that you do this every week. This led to greater optimism and happiness, better sleep patterns, more energy, and higher marital satisfaction. So just again, and journaling is just a conversation that you're having with yourself, right? It's just a focus on a time to dedicate to what do I have that I can appreciate. And so that can be something that you can do. And I'm going to say this because I just had this thought pop into my head. This is something, I don't want you to teach this to your children necessarily. That's not why I'm giving it. It's something that we can teach them, but this will be something for you to practice. Don't confuse gratitude with indebtedness, they explain. Indebtedness has a sort of negativity to it. Indebtedness means that we feel burdened by it, right? And oftentimes, it's only specific to the one person, whereas gratitude can be generalized to everybody. One of the things that they talk about in this article is to practice the experience of saying thank you and do it small. Focus on, I remember one time we did this as a company. We decided that we were going to thank everybody for everything. We were going to be very kind. We were going to get rid of the sarcasm. And we tried this for several weeks. And we found that our overall interactions were more positive. I found myself, each of us reported that we found ourselves being more positive in our lives and in our outlook, feeling safer. Continuing to go on to continue to develop gratitude with some ideas. The idea of not practicing a counterattack. At the University of Kentucky, there was an experiment, and they developed this idea that gratitude is more than just feeling good. It helps people become less aggressive by enhancing their empathy. So they exposed people to practices of gratitude, right? They had them practice gratitude and experience gratitude. And they gave them an opportunity to then shock somebody else, to expose somebody to something negative. And it wasn't real. But those who experienced more gratitude in their lives were much less likely to push this button that was supposedly shocking other people. They got criticized after an essay, and they were watching video games with revenge noise. And the subgroup who wrote an essay about gratitude did not punish the critics, did not punish the others in this game, whereas those that didn't do that did. An important piece of it is to share it. Again, that's part of this practice. Share it, and it helps us develop emotions and connection, emotions that are related to friendship and connection to others. So again, this is the idea of practicing gratitude. One idea is to practice a gratitude visit to somebody in your life, to just express your thankfulness to them for something that they've done. That can be by the phone, or can be in other mediums, but the idea of practicing that can help you develop and improve mood. Some people talk about the idea of contemplating a higher power, that people who have a higher power often have greater expressions of gratitude, and they tend to act more grateful. So that can be something, that can be one of the roads, one of the pathways for many people. And go deep for gratitude for what you have. After you practice gratitude light, start to look at the most important things in your life. One of the things that they suggest in this article is this idea of it could be worse. I don't know that I like this one. I'm going to put it in here because it was in their article. It's not my favorite, and I'll talk about my critique of it in just a moment. But exposing yourself to people with less, right? Service, right? That's one thing I remember Lady Di used to do with her children, is she wanted them to see people that were struggling and starving, to help them develop a sense of gratitude. Look around at others. My only problem with that is when we use that idea of it could be worse. I have a little bit, sometimes I hear that said to other people, like, you should feel grateful, look at what everybody else has. I don't like that, I don't experience that. Oftentimes to me that's just a clear message of not validating somebody's feelings. I heard somebody say one time, and I identify with it, it's telling somebody not to feel bad because it could be worse. It's like saying to somebody else, hey, you know what, you shouldn't be happy, other people have it better than you, right? And we would think of that as quite crazy. So I would be careful with that. I think creating experiences where you can be around people that have less than you can help you develop gratitude. But I would steer away from the message of encouraging, especially your children, of it could be worse. Instead, again, I would encourage you to go into the sadness with them, to go into their hurt and their pain, to sit with them in it without the need to fix it. And in so doing, you're engendering, encouraging them to feel all of their feelings. You're making it safe to feel all of their feelings. And when they can feel the depth, when they know it's okay to feel all of them, in my experience, like I'm saying with mindfulness and wholeness, they're much more likely to develop a sense of gratitude, which is the other side of sadness, right? The other side of hurt and of pain. I've seen this for years, like I said. This idea that abundance does not necessarily lead to gratitude. And I think that's the mistake that some of us parents make. We believe that if children have enough or a lot, that they're going to be grateful. But I've watched in wilderness therapy, children develop a sensibility of gratitude that they did not have at home. And they have much, much less in the wilderness. I remember I had a father years ago visiting the field for a visit with his son. And he said to me that it reminded him he had worked for the State Department over in a primitive third world country. And when he would visit the people and saw that they had nothing, he saw great amounts of happiness and gratitude. And he saw that in the wilderness with the dirty faces and the, out sitting out on the ground, cooking all the food over an open fire, having a shelter to sleep in, and people started to develop it. So it's important that we steer away from the concept in our lives that abundance automatically leads to gratitude. I often say all you have to do is take your children to Disneyland one time to learn the lesson that abundance does not necessarily lead to gratitude. I wanted to list some don'ts. Don't go too fast. Take it slow. Like I said, the route to gratitude can be an indirect and a slow one. Definitely don't tell others what to do. Let them feel what they're feeling. Don't try to rescue, pull their sadness away from them. That tells them to some degree that something's wrong with feeling it, that you're at least uncomfortable with it, and that your discomfort is evidence of something about them is broken or wrong or not good enough. So steer away from rescuing them from it. Learning not to punish yourself for your mistakes. Learning not to punish yourself when you aren't grateful, when you're struggling, right? Hold yourself kindly. Just observe it, know it, feel it. Find somebody who can contain it, who can listen to it. A friend, a colleague, a therapist, a sponsor, somebody. But not being hard on yourself is a key. This idea of giving a gift with strings attached, right? Do we give the gift because it's an expression of our love and generosity toward another? Or do we give it secretly hoping for gratitude or admiration or praise? And I think as parents, as people, we don't always recognize that until we feel the resentment. And then we can go back to ourselves and say, I'm recognizing that I'm not really giving a gift. This is more of an exchange. I give you this, you give me back the emotional validation. So that's an important question to ask. The last thing that I want to say about this is the connection between grace and gratitude. Our experience of grace, an experience where we receive something without our believing we have earned it, may be the most powerful way to engender gratitude. And this doesn't have to be necessarily associated in a religious context, although many people do associate it in that context. But in life, for me, my experience, when I've experienced grace in a relationship, grace in the experience of going to my own therapy, right, being loved, in spite of the fact that I make lots of mistakes, that experience of grace for me, just for me, is the most powerful ingredient in me experiencing and expressing gratitude. So I think there's something to this idea of grace with us. And for me, this doesn't necessarily rob us of boundaries as parents, but one of the things that I think this could play out in the relationship with our children is when we don't judge, right? When we learn to manage our emotions so we don't come at them with rage or disgust or a great deal of fear or anxiety. When we provide a safe emotional context for them, still having the boundaries that we want to have, that we need to have to feel okay. But when we remove all of those negative emotions, negative expressions that I just listed, our child can experience grace. When we learn to value the mistakes as much as the successes, our children can experience grace. When the mistakes don't devastate us, when they don't frighten us, when we recognize that in each mistake there's an opportunity to learn something. As long as they survive, there's an opportunity to make meaning and learn some of it. And indeed, most of us will talk about how much our mistakes have taught us in our lives. So again, I think this idea of experiencing grace, of offering grace, can be one of the greatest ingredients in engendering gratitude. Practice gratitude and don't promote it in others. By promoting it in others, I just mean trying to get somebody else to feel it. Don't force it. Don't command it. Don't require it of others. Right? Practice healthy boundaries. Assert yourself. Give gifts that are real gifts, not just exchanges for something in return. When we find ourselves feeling resentful, go back and check ourselves, evaluate ourselves. Practicing practicing gratitude, like that idea of journaling, or it's really anything you can do to focus. I assume, I'll take a guess, that nobody on this phone call tonight has a toothache, right? But the minute, like I said in the beginning of the webinar, that we experience a toothache, we appreciate the non-toothache. I just got over a really nasty cold for the last week. So today I have a great deal of gratitude for how I feel. Prior to that, I might not have had that focus if I wasn't practicing mindfulness and gratitude. I try to practice every day this idea of the non-toothache, of appreciating it, focusing on something that I have that I could take for granted until it was lost. So focus, dedication. I believe that therapy is a wonderful kind of mindfulness and practice, because therapy is nothing more than a conversation that you have with somebody where you more purposefully and intentionally focus on what you're feeling and thinking, believing, all of that, and that can lead to gratitude. Don't whitewash it and don't wallow. There's got to be a balance in our lives, right? Don't move too quickly to gratitude. Let ourselves feel pain and sadness, but when we find ourselves wallowing in it, and then be careful. This is not for somebody else. This is for you, not for somebody else in your life. You get to ask yourself, am I wallowing in this? Can I find a way out of this? Is there some need that I'm getting met by staying stuck in my non-gratitude, in my anger, in my resentment? Am I expecting something in life to happen instead of accepting? That's one of the ideas in the Knight in Rusty Armor that we talk about, learning to accept and not expect. So this holiday season is a perfect time to pause and to focus on things that we have often taken for granted or ignore. It is a time to slow down, put down our phones, look at each other in the eyes, and listen. Some will feel a lot of pain and loneliness during the holidays. This too should be a time for them to grieve, and we can develop the capacity to sit with loved ones in their sorrow. If we are allowed to focus on our losses and our sadness, we will also come to know our joys and our love better. May this season be a season of wholeness, joy, and the pain for all of you. All right, I'm happy to take any questions. Michael, from any parents? Can you offer some advice about how to navigate challenging relationships during the holidays? How do we handle certain triggers that come out during the holidays? Fantastic question. I'm going to make 2 comments about it. The first goes back to that last slide that I just suggested. And this is one of these themes that I've been thinking about lately with the families that I've been working with, is instead of, as a parent, when your child expresses pain, getting them out of it, spend some time sitting in it with them. It's one of the greatest things you can do. Sit in the pain with them. Listen to it. Don't fix it. Don't solve it. Don't even imply to them that it needs to be solved. In other words, it needs to be experienced and moved through as it moves through them, rather than fixing it with some solution. So that's the important thing, is learn to sit with others. The German word is Mitgeid. Mit means with and guide means sorrow. I will be with you in your sorrow. And I think as parents, specifically, let alone human beings, we really struggle with that. The second thing that I think about, and there are times that in the holidays when we get triggered by other family members. And for me, there's a few things here. When we get triggered by other family members, that's something about us, right? Something about us is getting triggered. And can we own that? Can we express ourselves assertively in the moment or ahead of time or all the time and say, this is what I need, this is what I feel comfortable. I remember a few years ago when there was a discussion happening in my house with other relatives as we were hosting a holiday party, and I said, I'm not comfortable with that in this house. I don't want my children to be exposed to the things that you're sharing and saying. And so I'm going to ask you to stop. And it's not like that's easy for me. And I talk about that all the time. It was a big risk for me, but I felt strong enough about it that I said it. So I took care of myself in that example. Can we take care of ourselves? Or are we waiting for other people to take care of us? Does our resentment and anger lead us to focus on what other people need to do to change? As Harriet Lerner says in her book, The Dance of Anger, anger is only an effective tool if it causes us to become more clear about ourselves. So taking care of ourselves, asserting ourselves and asking for what we need, and ultimately setting boundaries. It's not like nobody's ever going to push a button, but if somebody chronically can't respond to your boundaries and symptoms, then it becomes your job to not be around them, whatever that takes. If somebody's continually, constantly, without a willingness to explore or change, violating your boundaries, making you feel miserable because of what they're saying, then it's your job to take care of yourself. And I've spent so much of my life at times waiting for others, waiting for the other person to take care of me, instead of realizing that the real difficult work, the real important work, is learning how for me to take care of myself. And then there's also this piece that if I can see people, if I do my work enough, right, if I'm grounded enough, and that's a lot of work, that's a lot of therapy, it's a lot of coda meetings, it's a lot of reading, a lot of practice. If I'm grounded enough, when somebody says something ridiculous or stupid, I will just see them. I won't think it's about me. I won't make it about me. I'll feel sad for them. I'll recognize their hurt, their wound, whatever's going on. So that's probably the highest level. Those are the moments when I'm most capable of responding to others with compassion. And if I can't do that, then I have some work to do. I have somewhere to go to fill myself up a little bit, or I have some other way that I've got to take care of myself. So, great question. Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions about gratitude or Thanksgiving? Okay. I'll just go through the upcoming slides and then we will wrap up unless there are no questions. I'll get it. Here are the upcoming workshops. Finding You, December 10th through 13th. We have a few spots left. If you want to sign up, I'll be leading that one. That's for any adult, parent, non-parent. Last time we had half young adults and half parents. So it's any adult, and it worked really well when there was a mix. So here are the upcoming ones. We'll get some of this updated. Pursuits is our high adventure trip, super fun. I'm just going to pause on this for a moment. Please, if you're still in our program, if you just started in our program, we want you to attend 6 of these by the time. Don't wait until the end. We want you to attend 6 of these by the time your child leaves the program. Please make that investment. These are free. There aren't a lot of great services that are free. Try these. Be open to them. And don't just go to 1 or 2, but try at least 6 is our request. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram at Evoke Therapy, Facebook, Evoke Therapy Programs, or follow our blog. You can go to our Parent Alumni Foundation book page, and you can buy books by topic, and 10% of that goes to charity to help people who can't afford treatment. So if you're going to buy a therapy book related to the program, go there first, click on that link there, and then you can be donating to charity at the same time while spending the same price as you would on the other parts of the Amazon page. Any other questions that came up, Michael, while I was going through those slides? Not a question, but a comment. We're so grateful to you and to Evoke and the wonderful Evoke staff for your work with our daughter and our whole family. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I want to tell you something. And I've said this before, that if you're not learning as much from your clients as they're learning from you, you're doing it wrong. And I would say if you're not as grateful to your clients for what they're teaching you, for their heroic examples, then you're doing it wrong. So I accept your thank you and tell you you're welcome. And I want to tell all of you, I can't tell you how happy I am to do the work that we do. If I had all the time and all the money in the world, I would do exactly what I'm doing, working with your children and your families. Just yesterday, my daughter works at a residential treatment center here in the Salt Lake area, and I bumped into her, and I was dropping off something for her, and she was shuttling some young women around in her car. 2 of them had been at Evoke, and 2 of them thanked me for the work at Evoke and everything that had gone on, and talked about the webinars and stuff. And they were the sweetest thing, but I said to my daughter afterwards, I get as much or more out of it than the clients, I think. It actually, working with you helps me to be more grateful, helps me to be happy, reminds me of all the things I need to learn. So I want to express my gratitude to all of you also and say you're welcome. All right, folks, I hope you have I was going to say happy Thanksgiving, but I'll say a whole and meaningful and rich Thanksgiving. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next week. Oh, I forgot to go. Next week, we'll be talking about family of origin, one of my favorite subjects in the world, Tuesday, December 1st at, I didn't put the time. Let's do 6:30 p.m. 6:30 p.m., Tuesday, December 1st. I'll talk to you then. Have a great evening. Take care. Bye-bye. One more question came in. Do you want to? Oh, we'll just add it on to next time. Oh, can you take a moment to speak about heading into the holidays and releasing expectations about how you wish things were? Can you take a moment to speak about heading into the holidays and releasing expectations about how you wish things were? I think first of all, in line with what I was saying, I think first of all it's okay to grieve for the loss because there is a loss. These are losses, and if you allow yourself to experience the loss, I think again it can bring you back to the love and to the connection and to the joy, right? And you can recognize that that loss can lead you to greater lessons. It can motivate you. I always talk with the clients and the students about how it can motivate you to make the future meaningful, right? I always say we don't care about the holidays 2015. We care about the holidays 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, and so on. So allow yourself to grieve, and then embrace what is. Embrace what is. And what is right now is a little bit painful and a little bit sad and a little bit hard and a little bit what you didn't expect. What I do know is that this experience can lead to a fantastic, a contribution to a fantastic and whole life and greater wisdom than if you had never gone through any of this. I can tell you that I know that that can happen. I just read a letter from a father to a daughter today, and a very, very, very difficult conversation. Very difficult situation that led up to her enrollment in wilderness and therapeutic boarding school. Really, really scary. And the whole entire letter from the father, unprompted by me, was thanking his daughter for what she did that got him to reevaluate his life. And this is a very, by many people's measure, very successful father. But he was going deeper and he was having a richer experience. All right, I'll take one more question. My son spent last Thanksgiving in Utah. He wants to be with his girlfriend in the evening. He's 15. Thanksgiving has always been a family time for us. Am I being too strict and not letting him see her on Thanksgiving? I don't know if you're being too strict. You get to decide that. I would say you get to decide what you feel comfortable with. I would ask you, it's not my place to tell you how strict or not to be. The discussion that we would have, the dialogue that we would have about it would be more around why yes and why no. What are you afraid of? What are you uncomfortable with? What does having all of family time mean? Right? Could letting go of that, letting him have this little compromise in independence, be honoring him as a family member? But on the end of the day, it's what do you need to do to feel comfortable? And we could have a dialogue around that so that we could explore motives and intentions and wounds and hurts and control and letting go and all of those things. But you get to ask yourself those questions, I guess, is the answer. And there's no one right reason, for sure. There's no right reason. If you did it out of guilt, if you did it out of shame, if he's trying to blackmail you and said, hey, you put me in wilderness last year, I was in wilderness or therapeutic school last year, I earned this, I'm not okay with that part, that discussion, right? That's not what I would base it on. So if it's guilt or makeup, then don't do it, right? But you get to ask yourself, like, do I feel comfortable? Can I make this? I'm calling it a compromise because it sounds like some of the time he'll spend with you. Maybe you can have her over. Maybe you've already explored that. But it's more important that you ask yourself, why are you doing it instead of what are you doing? So, sorry, I can't give you a direct answer because I think that the answer is through a process where you ask yourself questions and find out what your motives and intentions are. All right, folks, have a great evening. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.